Hello, fellow foodies, and welcome back. This is Dr. Cassandra Quave, and you're listening to Foodie Pharmacology, the science podcast for the food curious. This week is Halloween, and I was looking high and low for the most interesting Halloween stories. This week, we have a fabulous guest on our show. We have Amy Bruni on the line. Amy is a professional paranormal investigator, author, podcaster, and TV host. In 2007, she began appearing on the show Ghost Hunters, which is one of the longest running and highest rated paranormal television shows. Now she's the co-star and executive producer of the travel channels Kindred Spirits, and she's also host of the true crime podcast Haunted Road. Amy is the owner of Strange Escapes, a company offering paranormal excursions to some of America's most notoriously haunted destinations. And she's also the author of this great new book entitled Food to Die For. Amy lives in Newport, Rhode Island, and it's so great to chat with you today, Amy. Thanks so much for coming on the show.
Yeah, of course. Thanks for having me.
Yeah. Well, first of all, congratulations on your new book. I loved reading it and checking out the recipes. And I mean, I think what you captured there is this amazing blend of history, storytelling, and incredible food. So I thought maybe we could cover some examples from the book and maybe talk about the intersection between food and culture and this very interesting theme of the paranormal as we celebrate Halloween.
Yeah, of course. Happy to. Thank you.
Yeah. So I noticed some of the interesting places that you researched include some very spooky old hotels. Were there any that, you found to be your favorite or were the most interesting from a paranormal perspective?
Yeah. So my favorite, hands down, is the Mount Washington Hotel in New Hampshire. I have been going to that hotel now for, gosh, I want to say almost 20 years at this point, and I've had a number of very eerie paranormal experiences there, but it's also just become just like such a family tradition for me. So it's one of those places where I find it to be, I always say it's the most haunted place I know in the United States. But it's also very comfortable. And of course they have fabulous food too. So that helps. But yeah, it's very special to me in a lot of ways.
Great. And so what type of food did you feature from this hotel?
So
Trying
the
to see.
funny thing is I asked them for a recipe because I'm pretty close with a lot of the staff there. And I was really surprised that they gave me a blueberry maple sausage recipe from their breakfast, from that they serve at breakfast every day. And apparently, and the irony here is I'm actually a pescatarian, so I don't eat meat. Um, and so I was like, oh, I don't know what I expected them to give me, but then that has turned into one of the favorite recipes from the book for people. Like, obviously, we have to test every recipe.
Yeah.
Um, and my writing partner, Julie, she tested all the super meaty ones. So she got to
Mhm.
test the sausage one, and she was like, "This is really good." Uh, and I go there a lot, and so I see people, chowing down on that sausage every morning. So
That's awesome. Well, besides the hotels, I know you also cover some pretty, I would say, I guess, homes that have interesting pasts, including the home of Lizzie Borden. What is that house like?
So it's funny because Lizzie or Lisbeth, she really prefers to be called Lisbeth, which is very funny. She changed her name to Lisbeth before she died. But so her recipe, her meatloaf recipe is what inspired the entire book for me. I've spent a lot of time at the
Yeah.
Lizzie Borden house because I live in Newport. And so the house itself, it's very historic. It's also, it's hard not to think about what's happened there. Um, I found I don't think it's as haunted as her actual residence that she used to live in a place called Maple Cross that she lived in after she was acquitted. And that house, which is now a private residence, to me is much more haunted than the actual Lizzie Borden house. But the Lizzie Borden house is such fascinating history and it's a tourist attraction and everything. But yeah, her meatloaf recipe, I saw their actual recipe card and everything, and that was what kind of inspired the
Wow.
whole book. That I saw them post it on the local historical society posted it on social media and I saw it and I was like, that is crazy that you can make Lizzie's meatloaf. Like it's in her handwriting and everything. This was her special meatloaf.
Wow. So for the listeners here, this is a bit of a different twist. We have all types of episodes on food and the microbiome and like in pharmacology. So the paranormal is definitely a different angle for us this week. And could you maybe elaborate a little bit more about when you say a place is haunted or that Lizzie's house is not as haunted as another locations where she lived? What do you mean by that? And how does one determine the hauntedness of a
Yeah, like,
location?
how do you quantify such a thing? Well, just so as long as I've been doing this, I will be the first to tell you that I will never say that ghosts absolutely exist. I don't
Mhm.
ever speak in absolutes when it comes to ghosts and the paranormal. I have a lot of theories just because I've been so many places and had so many strange, unexplainable experiences. But I can't tell you what causes them per se. But so when I say that one house is more haunted than the other, so at the Lizzie Borden house, which I've stayed in many times, I've stayed in the rooms where people were killed and whatnot. Uh, I've had some, just thinking, I don't know how I would sleep. Well,
So,
it's funny because when I stayed there, I used to know the former owner and she was lovely. She's since passed away, unfortunately. But like now, the way they have it set up, like the room actually has like I find this to be really in poor taste, but they have like an actual mannequin like murdered on the floor next to where you like so awful. And it's like, so I don't really go back there. But when I went there back in the simpler times, we just talked about the murders and didn't stage them. Um, it was I didn't have a lot of activity. I had a few what we call EVPs, which are electronic voice phenomena. It's where we use a recorder and we'll speak and ask questions, and we'll hear something or someone answer that we do not see. And so I got a few of those there. But then when I went to Maplecroft, which again, that's the house that she bought with the money that she inherited when she was acquitted of the murder. She and her sister inherited all of her father's money. They bought this beautiful mansion in Fall River because Lizzie Borden always said that she wanted to face the people who all thought that she murdered her parents. She wanted to face them when they found the real killer, which no one else was ever tried for those murders. But that house, a lot of things happen. We've had full conversations with who we believe to be her. We've heard, she seems to have a little bit of a sassy streak. She's very yeah, it's very interesting. So, but the difference between those two locations is huge.
wow, that's incredible. So I mean, you're kind of traipsing through time, and there are some other places that you cover in the recipe book. I'm wondering if you've also visited there. One that caught my interest was Tombstone,
Oh yeah.
the legendary, places, the OK Corral. Like, so what is it like to visit these historic places where you have multiple players of historic relevance?
Yeah, so I am a big history buff and I love researching. And so that's, one of the things I say when people come to me and say, I don't believe in ghosts. I'm like, I don't care. Listen, you don't have to believe in ghosts, but just know that I will always get my history right. I will dig until I make sure, like, whether you believe in ghosts or not, the history is always correct. So I have that for me. But Tombstone, I actually went there fairly recently. I'm going back in February, and it really is. It is a step back in time. They have the whole little main street. It's all unpaved and dusty. There are so many reenactors. And like I got there and instantly I felt out of place and I had to go buy a cowboy hat and a duster. So I could and it just and I stayed at a dude ranch out there last time I went and, ate breakfast off the back of a chuck wagon. And, it's really, it is really you do feel like you're living in that time period. And I think a lot of that has to do with the food, really, and how how
Mhm.
they're serving you there and stuff. So, and, you go into the restaurants and the bars and very rowdy. It's just like what you would expect it to be.
Yeah. Well, and like when I think about old foods, especially like old foods in the South, absinthe comes to mind too. The absinthe that you can still get, I guess, in New Orleans, but you have something on the Absinthe House. And absinthe is interesting because it's also like it's a European. beverage that made its way over from these bitter wild plants that, became such a key part of the American culture too. So what can you share with us about your absinthe recipe and kind of the research that went into that one?
Yeah, so that one's really interesting. I'm actually gonna bring it up while I'm talking to you because that is one
Yeah.
of the few places that I have not been in person.
Oh, okay.
It was which is not but
Mhm.
I have been to New Orleans. I just haven't
Yeah.
been to that particular place, and it's been in operation since 1807, and
Right? Yeah.
and and so you can just think of the people that have sat there over the years and enjoyed absinthe when it was very much illegal. I mean, it was only legal in the United States, I think, beginning like 2007, I think. It was not it's
Yeah.
pretty recent, and I know that I had absinthe before that. But, yeah, it's just interesting to me how you can have a place that has been the same thing for that long, serving the same sort of dish for as long as it has, and that one is the absinthe frappe. It's like I mean, it's absinthe and anise and simple syrup and then club soda
Oh.
and mint, and it's just a really great cocktail. It
Mhm.
really kind of because I feel like absinthe on it, I mean, you do always have to almost have something with it. I don't think it's something you can just drink on it,
No,
but
no.
do not recommend. But that's just like the perfect mix where you can actually like really enjoy it, and it's a great cocktail.
It's amazing. Oof. Well, I'm trying to think of some other ones that caught my interest. I guess, the hellish institutions. When I think of Halloween and I'm thinking of like, these institutions, prisons, insane
Yeah.
asylums, like, I'm assuming you visited probably many of these because of their ties to the paranormal. Like, what have been some of your adventures in some of these institutions and kind of what
Yeah.
inspired the food there?
Well, it's funny because I always warn people that the book is 80% of the recipes are delicious and
Mhm.
20 of them are very historic. 20% of them are very historic. I'm kind of like, there's a little forewarning there. And some of those come from places like Eastern State Penitentiary in Philadelphia. We have a recipe for something called Nutriloaf. And Nutriloaf is basically it's like ground beef and corn flakes and peanut. It's just everything like to make some sort of sustenance, and it's supposed to taste terrible. Um, and so, but it's basically to keep them alive, but also not taste good. They didn't want them to enjoy the food, and so believe it or not, there are variations of Nutriloaf like all over the country, which is bizarre. I did not know that till I wrote this book,
Wow.
um, but yeah, so that's one of those things I tell people, you can try it, but it is very, again, historic. It might be something to make like when you're trying to give your child a consequence or something. Like tonight we're having Nutrilo for dinner. Um, so yeah, that I found to be interesting. I've been to Eastern State Penitentiary many times, investigated there many times. I do love visiting there because they have really perfected the idea of keeping the prison in a state of arrested decay. So, like, they're not letting it go any further, but it still very much shows its age. And so it's a really interesting spot. Um, another
Is it
one,
still an active prison? Like, are people still held there?
no, no, no,
Okay,
it's
okay.
actually a museum. And so they go back
Yeah.
and forth. Sometimes they have art exhibits and installations in there. And a lot of these places, I love it. They work a lot with like photographers and artists that come in because there
Mhm.
is something very strangely beautiful about places like that with the way the light comes in. And in some places, there's green, there's like trees and things growing up in through the building because it's starting to be reclaimed by the earth in a way. And so, yeah, it's a beautiful place. So yeah, I'm trying to think. There's another one too. Oh, the old city jail in St. Augustine, Florida.
Ah.
That we have a recipe for hardtack, which is actually something that sailors ate as well a lot as they were it's basically just
Yeah.
flat water and salt, and so
Just like not is it baked like a cracker
it's
or what
baked
is
like a cracker and it
Oh,
lasts for a very long time, and so they
okay.
would make huge amounts of hardtack and feed it to the prisoners, or their inmates, and then even, like I said, other like sailors and stuff would use it too to get across the ocean, so it's another doozy that I do not
Well, I'm
do not
just thinking
recommend serving to
we're
guests.
a Halloween party where you can have the trick or the treat buffet table. Oh my God. A Partack and
Exactly.
Nutrilife, and then on the other table, if you pick option door number 2, you can get absinthe frappe.
Yeah, that will be my table.
Let's see. I do see too. I'm just thinking of some of my favorite places. You also include Key West and Hemingway's house, where of course there are so many cats at Hemingway's house. These very interesting
I know.
polydactyly cats. So, I mean, I love the geographic spread of this. So, what are your thoughts about Hemingway's the spookiness of that house and yeah, what inspired
It's
that
It's
drink?
funny because that house is, rumored to be haunted, and people will hear his typewriter still clicking away. That's the
Oh
big one.
yeah,
Will hear or smell cigarette smoke, or cigar smoke, I should say. They also see the spirit of I believe it was his wife who he lived with there.
hmm
Um, but yeah, I've been there a couple of times, and it's just the cats. I have a polydactyl cat who's gonna probably this interview at any point. And his name is Harry. I named my cat Harry after Ernest Hemingway's favorite bar. It was called
nice.
Harry. And that is where the recipe is for his Bloody Marys it's from Harry's, the bar that Ernest Hemingway loved. And it is a very strong cocktail. Who will tell?
Great.
Yeah.
Amazing. So, when you are, in the scope of your work in podcasting and in, your work on TV, how how does food play into your overall storytelling? I mean, because you've got this great kind of empire of periodal things that you're doing, and I know that you also do these experience exhibits. Like, how does food play into your storytelling, into the experiences that you have or the experiences that you take people on?
I've always been a bit of a foodie. I'm not like a professional chef or cook or anything. I do love to cook, obviously, but I am always trying, it's kind of selfish, but I'm always trying to think of ways to parlay my deep love and interest of ghosts and all things spooky into other projects because I want to do this for as long as possible. And so I'm always trying to keep it interesting and trying to kind of, spread my wings any way I can. And I just remember thinking, I just saw this kind of obviously I saw Lizzie's meatloaf recipe and that kind of inspired me. And then I started noticing like places we went, how often food played into things. And then I started thinking too, as a history buff, when you walk into a museum or something, you can see like these kind of artifacts laid out and you can imagine what it was like back then, or you can look at photos. But if you're cooking something from a time period, you are actually reliving that to like the greatest extent. You're smelling it, you're tasting it, you're doing exactly what they did. It's really a way to transport you. And so that was really what kind of got me with this sort of, we all remember some recipe or something that your grandma made. And the second you smell it, you instantly kind of get turned,
Yeah.
that moment. And so there was just something about that, because I go into all of these historical places and I always wonder, like, what if, what was it like? And food just kind of seemed like a really direct bridge to experiencing some of that. And, it just kind of goes along with the hauntings in the sense that I do so many research on these places. It turned out there were actually really interesting and great recipes associated with a lot of them. Some of them directly involved, when you have the Celie Rose house where Celie Rose murdered her family by poisoning their smear case, which is cottage cheese. you
Wow.
know, and so here's your smear case recipe without the rat poison.
Without the rat poison. Okay,
Yeah,
good to
don't
know.
use the rat poison. But, so
Wow.
that, when you have Lavinia Fisher, the serial killer from Charleston, South Carolina, who gave her, gave them tea, poisoned them with tea, things like that. So again, don't
Wow.
put oleander in the tea. Just
No oleander and tea. Noted.
yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. That's wild. That has to be so much fun to kind of to dive deeper into these stories. And I mean, I think some of my favorite places to visit are these very old hotels, and I could see what you mean about being transported into a different era. through those
Yeah.
special dishes. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, and
Do you
it's,
have
there
it?
is no, go ahead.
No, no, go ahead. Yeah.
I was just gonna say, like, and it's funny too, 'cause some of the recipes are directly correlated with some point of history, but others were like, like the Mount Washington, they wanted to showcase this really great recipe of theirs. Some of them were just given to me directly, like, "We want you to put this one in the book," and then others have, like, a direct connection to history somehow, so I just like that
Yeah.
there's a variation.
Nice. Now, did any of these recipes, when we're thinking about poisonings, did any of these recipes include mushrooms? I'm just
I actually I don't know off the top of my head. I can't I don't think
I
so.
don't
Be care
remember seeing them. I'm just like, "Oh my
Please
goodness." Like,
don't go
make sure we
foraging
put in
for
the right ones, into
Yes,
these
exactly.
into these ones. Yeah. Oh gosh, there was one other I wanted to make sure we talked about. Alcatraz, because this one was
Oh,
surprising to me. Cinnamon sugar cookies from Alcatraz, which was not what
isn't
I was
that
expecting. Mm.
so funny? So, that one, actually, that was one of the first ones I found. That was actually one of the ones that I put in, like, the pitch for the book initially because I just
Mhm.
thought it was so funny. I had found this old cookbook from, like, wardens or wives, and come to find out, like, because I'm really on the lookout for because, like, the book is like,
Mhm.
people are loving the book, so I envision another one happening, so I'm always on the lookout. You would be surprised how many, like, prison-related cookbooks there are made
Wow.
by wives of the employees, because I think what happened was, but, back then, it was all men working in the prison, the inmates were all men even most of the time. And so you had all these wives that lived on site because they had all this employee housing and stuff surrounding these prisons, and
Mhm.
so they started making cookbooks. But yeah, the cinnamon sugar cookies, that's one people make a lot. They love that recipe. And so, yeah, I think it came from one of the warden's wife. I'm remembering it off the top of my head, but it's something
Yeah,
along
yeah. No, I
the
love that story. I love that idea though, because it's a good point. You have all these different characters in these historic sites. It's not just about the inmates, it's about the people that run the facilities and then also the people that are married to those people running the facilities,
Yeah, and then sometimes
that are part of
would
that
cook for
history.
the inmates as, like, part of, like, holidays and stuff. They would, depending on the prisons, sometimes they would treat them and, so it's interesting to kind of look back at that bit of history.
Yeah. Wild. Wild, wild. So, when you're looking for new recipes, I guess, like for our listeners that are out there, I'm sure there are many cookbook aficionados, that also hit up estate sales and things like that. Like,
Mhm.
where does one keep an eye out for these? Is that kind of where you find it, or you find it through historic, like library research, or?
I found all of the above. Some of them come
Mhm.
directly from the location, some come from historical societies. I've now started picking anytime I see a cookbook associated with something, I grab it. Like, I just bought one off of eBay yesterday from an old
Mhm.
hospital nearby. Um, and so I'll just see things like that, and
Yeah.
that's really where they come from. But then some of them are kind of like, for example, like the Waverly Hills vegetable soup actually originated from a tuberculosis hospital in New Mexico. But then the Kentucky Living magazine published it as part of, like, what they served at Waverly and gave it a little Kentucky twist, which I'm still not sure what that twist was. They said it was a Kentucky twist. I don't know. So sometimes they kind of come from where you wouldn't quite expect.
Yeah. Yeah, I can imagine, yeah, that's an interesting site thinking about TB, because they were definitely probably trying to come up with recipes to keep their patients healthy and these
Yeah,
TB-borne.
the
Yeah,
vegetable soup, it's very
yeah.
simple because obviously they had to feed it to hundreds of patients at a time, and
Mhm.
I've made it now a few times, and, because it freezes really well too, and it's just such a basic recipe, but it's very good. I usually add some more seasoning to it, but I guess if you have tuberculosis, you're not
May
picky,
wanna
but
keep it bland. Yeah, yeah.
yeah.
That's great. Well, as I'm trying to think of some other things, I definitely don't wanna give away all of the secrets of the book because I want readers to definitely go out and check stuff out.
Yes.
Um, I guess, one other topic we might cover is, you know, has this interest in the paranormal in some way fueled your own interest in trying out new foods of the past? Like, is that kind of spurred this interest in history or dishes that you wouldn't normally come like, I don't know. I wouldn't just
No,
normally say
that's a very
I'm gonna
fair
make
question.
hardtack and try out
No,
what hardtack tastes like. Yeah.
I sound like for like, cause just looking at I look at cookbooks all the time and have many. I feel like there's this kind of interest in like historical gastronomy right now. Like people are really
Mhm.
kind of um I think it really started with people wanting to make those really freaky Jello molds that we all kind of grew up with. Like, I was
Yes.
talking to a friend about it recently, and they were talking about how it was like in the 50s, which is, yes, when those cookbooks came out.
Mhm.
But I remember as a child of the 80s, my grandparents and my aunts and stuff were still making those things and bringing them to family gathering, you know? And so I just like, I think that there is this kind of curiosity about foods of the past because the way we've eaten has changed so much, even in the last like 10 or 20 years. And uh, what my mom made me today, like I could not dream of making for my child. Some of the things, yes, but there are other things where I'm like, wow, I can't believe that I ate that. So, but yeah, so it definitely has. And it's also because I'm looking at recipes that probably wouldn't normally make. And then I make it and I go, oh my gosh, this is amazing. Like something I never would have thought that I would enjoy. Uh, like the peanut soup from Gettysburg. Like that to me, I thought that sounds terrible. But then I made it and it's really delicious. And I remember
Mm.
taking a bite of it years ago, but that's something now it's on a regular rotation in the house. And so,
Nice.
yeah, yeah.
Good protein packed soup. I like that.
Exactly.
Yeah. When you're talking about Jello molds, I'm thinking back to one that was a holiday favorite in our house when I was growing up, and I think my mom called it green fluff or something. It was like green Jello with cottage cheese, Miracle Whip, and like pecans or so all these weird things. You're like,
I
that does
know.
not go together. But then
I
it was
remember
actually
that.
so good.
There was one with like raisins and shaved carrots and like Cool Whip. And I'm like, who's like, I'm going to make a salad with, and they called them salads.
Call them salads, yes.
I'm
It's
going
a
to make
green
a
salad.
salad with some, some grated carrots and raisins and mayonnaise and Cool Whip. Enjoy. That's what we're having. Oh, and there are grapes. I think it's ambrosia salad is what I'm
Oh, the grapes,
describing.
the ambrosia. Yes, 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 yes. No, but the Cool Whip in there was the secret ingredient, I remember.
I
Yeah.
actually think I might have liked ambrosia salad now that I think about it.
Yeah, yeah. It's I haven't made it in a while. I'll have to like and I have these old cookbooks from I wouldn't think of them as spooky cookbooks, but I mean, they're interesting because they come up from that era. Like these are the
Mhm.
old, like some of my grandmothers and my great aunts' cookbooks that they left that are from the 1950s that are in that era where it was trendy and cool to take a can of something and combine it with a can of something else. And then, that
I
was like
know.
luxury at the time to have store-bought canned goods that you could then blend together with like the Cool Whip or whatever or
Yeah.
casseroles. Yeah. Yeah.
It was something else. It was like, what processed food can we make even more processed? Like, what can
Exactly.
although there were probably less ingredients in that then that there are in whatever we're eating
Prob
now. So it was probably a lot
probably
safer
so.
back then.
Yeah, probably so.
But
Well,
yeah, I mean, no, go ahead.
no, no, I was just wondering, so producer Rob, who produces this show, he's like, "You have to ask her about her destination, like her wine retreat getaways and these experiences she does with ghosts." It was like so I'm gonna ask, like, tell us about these trips that you do and, like, what types of foods do you choose or what I mean, do you also select things to kind of go with the sites that you're taking people to visit to kind of set the
Yeah.
ambiance? Yeah.
Well, I mean, I didn't really think about it before, but now will and do. So
Mhm.
I own a company called Strange Escapes, and what it is we take basically haunted vacations, and so it's an experience. It's like anywhere from 3 to 7 days. I literally just got home from a cruise, a Strange Escapes cruise, a couple days ago, where we did
Wow.
New England and Canada and everything, and it was so fun. But it's a lot of people who are interested in ghosts and history, and we get together and we go to some place like the Mount Washington or like the Stanley Hotel or the Queen Mary. And the first night we usually have this really great big kickoff party, and then the rest of the weekend, we're doing meals together and whatnot, but we're doing lectures and workshops, and then we're actually like investigating and looking for ghosts at night. And it's so fun.
Oh,
And
fun.
yeah, I'm working on a food to die for themed one so that we can
Ooh.
have like different foods from the book. But like we're
Mhm.
going to Tombstone, and Tombstone's featured twice in the book. And so we're going to Tombstone in February, where I will definitely be like, we're doing a big, like, kind of, I don't want to call it a hoedown because that's not, but we're doing like a cowboy kickoff party the first night. And I'm going to have them make one of the recipes from the book. Probably there's like it's a tomato Italian. It's like a pasta from Big Nose Kate's Saloon. I'm going to have them make that. So,
Oh,
well,
nice. Nice,
yeah.
nice. That's fun. I'm gonna go on these types of cruises. This is like well, one of my friends does these science cruises with Nat Geo, and it's like those sound like fun. I think paranormal cruises sound like fun too. We could do them
It's
together.
really fun.
Yeah.
It's like, it runs the gamut because you have people who are like just diehard super into it. And then you have like their drag along spouse or friends that they bring. And, so then we get to convert them. And it's so much fun. And plus the tours like, I think this week we went to the Titanic burial site in Halifax, Nova
Oh,
Scotia. We
wow.
go visit that. And then we also got to visit, what was the other place? Oh, gosh, we went to, there was a massive explosion in Halifax, Nova Scotia too, that we got to learn a
Oh,
lot about
wow.
as and we had another really fun, we had lunch at this like old haunted pub in Portland, Maine that was really, so it was a really fun week. Oh,
Neat.
we
Oh,
toured Belcourt Castle here in Newport. It was weird because I live in Newport, and the cruise stopped in Newport, which was pretty
oh,
funny. I came home and saw my cats. But we toured, Belcourt Castle, and then we went to the Valley Inn restaurant, which is not in the book, but I've almost talked him into letting me put it in the next one. He was very worried about his recipes being proprietary.
yeah.
Um, but we stopped there, and there's some really interesting history there. It's the only place in America where someone was executed due to the testimony of a ghost. So,
Oh, wow.
mm,
That's a
yeah,
fascinating
and
story.
yeah, yeah.
So, as folks gear up for Halloween this week, do you have any tips if they're interested in the paranormal or in ghost sightings? Like, any tips for what they should do this week?
Well, my tip is that everyone's going to be doing ghost stuff this week, and so if you really are interested, then wait until the crowds go away and go check it out on November 1st. You know what I mean?
That's great. Yeah.
I always try to remind people, I'm like, we do exist the other 11 months of the year, I promise. And it's,
Yeah.
like always, whenever people say they want to go visit Salem or something in October, I'm like,
Mhm.
don't do it.
Yeah.
Uh, but we love this time of year. Everyone loves to talk to us this time of the year, which is wonderful. And it's our chance to kind of, talk to people about ghosts and spirits and hauntings and let them know that we're not all kooky and crazy and that it's just a very passionate hobby. And for some people, a very real belief system. So,
Yeah. Oh, that's fascinating. Well, Amy, this
mhm.
has been so much fun. Where can I send people to learn more about what you do, and also get a copy of your book?
So the book is available anywhere books are sold. It's even in Costco right now, which is really lovely.
Amazing.
And so they can get it any bookstore or Amazon, of course. And they can just go to amybruni.com to check out anything about me, anything I'm doing, all of my social medias, all that fun stuff. It's all there.
Fantastic. AmyBruni.com. Well, thank you so much, Amy, for coming on the show. This was so much fun. Happy
Yeah.
Halloween to you. I'm sure
Happy
you're going to have a
Halloween.
very exciting week. And
Yes.
yeah, thanks so much, foodies, for tuning in. I hope you have a spooky and spectacular week ahead. I want to thank our producers, Rob Cohen and Christine Roth, for putting on a great show for you this week and every other week. You can find out more about our show at foodiepharmacology.com. You can check out this episode and all of our others on YouTube at the Teach Ethnobotany YouTube channel, or just again, you can stream us on any of your favorite podcast streaming platforms. Thanks so much for listening. Stay healthy out there, and we'll see you next time.